Born Norma Jeane in a Los Angeles foster home, she became the most photographed woman of the 20th century, and the world mistook her public mask for the whole person. Hollywood's golden machine sold the dumb blonde and profited wildly, but that caricature was a problem. It erased a fiercely curious, strategic woman who refused to stay boxed in. Her answer wasn't just talent, it was strategy. She studied at the Actors Studio with Lee Strasberg, read and wrote obsessively, married playwright Arthur Miller, and in 1955 created Marilyn Monroe Productions to wrest creative control from the studios. She rewrote lines, demanded different lighting, chose collaborators, and quietly built a playbook for surviving and shaping an industry that wanted to contain her. Along the way, she kept notebooks full of poems and reflections, negotiated pay and roles few women dared to ask for, and turned vulnerability into a deliberate art form. Those choices changed not only her career, but the way Hollywood handled actresses for generations. Watch on to uncover the hidden moves behind the glamour, the risks she took, the clever gambles she won, and the 4 decisions that reveal Marilyn Monroe as a brilliant, intentional force behind the mask. 1. Strong hook, shocking fact or question about her hidden intellect. Most people remember her as the incandescent blonde on magazine covers, but the truth is sharper and quieter. She dedicated herself to serious study of acting and literature, and those who worked closest to her insisted she was a thinker as well as a performer. Colleagues from the Actors Studio noted her commitment. A playwright who married her admired her curiosity and capacity for sustained intellectual engagement. Short and simple, she read and she worked. The gap between the public persona and the private scholar created a problem that shaped her career. The press and film marketing relied on a narrow caricature, which obscured the long hours she spent dissecting scenes, parsing motivations, and rehearsing technique. Instead of accepting that limiting image, she responded by enrolling in method classes, carrying notebooks, and insisting that parts be explored beyond the shimmering surface. Small acts of discipline, annotated scripts, late-night readings, private coaching, became the tools she used to solve the mismatch between perception and reality. She sought out teachers and materials that would push her beyond glamour into craft. At the Actors Studio, she absorbed methods that demanded psychological listening and emotional truth. Her personal papers and notebooks, later published in excerpts, show a woman annotating plays, sketching character backstories, and quoting poets to herself as prompts. Anecdotes from directors and fellow actors describe a performer who arrived early, learned lines by working their subtext, and tested scenes until the inner life of a character could be felt rather than merely shown. Concrete example: she negotiated with writers and directors for moments that revealed vulnerability instead of relying only on looks, turning comedic timing into a means of character revelation. Understanding this hidden intellect changes how we watch and remember her work. Re-examining famous scenes with an eye for the choices she made, timing, breath, the hesitation before a line, reveals deliberate technique rather than instinct alone. Read her notebooks, listen to the testimony of those who taught and loved her, and you'll find practical lessons about discipline, the importance of mentorship, and the power of self-education. Take one small step. Open one of her published writings, or revisit a scene, and note the decisions beneath the smile. 2. Present the problem, public image versus private reality. 3. Early life and background. She became one of the most photographed faces in the world, endlessly reproduced on magazine covers and in studio publicity stills. Yet the smile in those photographs often felt like a contract rather than an expression. Photographers, costume designers, and studio press departments honed a single, seductive silhouette. Breathy laughter, platinum hair, a curated vulnerability that sold tickets and headlines. At the same time, the woman behind the camera lenses kept private notebooks, read widely, and pursued rigorous actor training. The contradiction was not accidental but engineered, part commercial strategy, part survival mechanism. The result was a public persona that flattened complexity into a marketable shorthand, while the private life grew more intricate and fragile with each compartmentalized performance. She fought back against that flattening in practical, unmistakable ways. Determined to be more than a decorative trope, she sought serious acting mentors, studied method acting with a demanding teacher, and even created her own production company so she could choose scripts and directors rather than accept roles that only reinforced the stereotype. These moves were deliberate attempts to bridge the gap between how she was sold to the public and how she wanted to be known, an actor with craft, not merely a commodity. The public image remained powerful, but the choices she made, selective roles, intensive coaching, and behind-the-scenes control, provide clear evidence that she saw the mask and tried to recalibrate it from within. Born as Norma Jeane and raised amid instability, her early life reads like the foundation of that later duality. Her mother struggled with mental illness and poverty, which led to long stretches in foster homes and temporary care. She spent part of her childhood in an orphanage and often lacked the steady family anchors other children took for granted. A young marriage followed as a pragmatic way to escape that precarious situation, and the first work she took on included industrial jobs, one of which brought her to the attention of a photographer who saw a camera-ready presence in her face and posture. Modeling assignments followed, then a studio contract and a name change that would become synonymous with Hollywood glamour. Behind these externally visible shifts were habits of reading, writing, and self-study. She kept books and notes, rehearsed lines obsessively, and sought teachers who would take her seriously. Those early dislocations, illegitimacy, foster care, the urgency to secure safety at a young age, help explain why she was both eager to please and fiercely determined to reinvent herself. The mask was protective. It shielded her from exposure and offered a kind of currency. Yet it was also a barrier to the recognition she craved as an artist. Her attempts to control her image, to learn her craft, and to build a professional foothold reveal someone constantly negotiating between external expectations and internal authenticity. If you look beyond the publicity shots to the letters, the choice of collaborators, and the formation of her own production entity, a portrait emerges of a person who used performance as both refuge and reclamation. Look deeper into performances and personal archives to see how that negotiation plays out in specific roles and private writings. Watch scenes where comic timing and raw vulnerability coexist, and read interviews and correspondence that show an avid intellect trying to be heard. The surface remains mesmerizing, but greater insight waits for anyone willing to move past the mask and consider the early scars and strategic choices that shape the person beneath it. 4. Rise to fame and key achievements. She arrived in show business as a bit player and a model, but the industry quickly trapped her in a narrow typecast, the giggling blonde who existed mainly as a sight gag and a publicity magnet. That pigeonhole was a problem because it reduced her to an image, denying the complexity she worked to develop behind the scenes. Studios liked the predictable box office formula, and the public loved the glamour. Neither automatically translated into respect for craft. The result was a persistent tension between the persona the world adored and the performer she wanted to be. To break out of that loop, she took deliberate, strategic steps. She sought rigorous acting training at the Actors Studio under Lee Strasberg to deepen her technique and emotional truth. She formed her own production company to claim creative control, rejecting the passive role many actresses were forced into. Those moves changed the conversation about her. No longer only a commodity, she became a creative force who could negotiate roles, scripts, and the kinds of directors she worked with. Audiences still laughed and swooned, but critics began to take notice of range and craft as well. Concrete achievements followed. A string of high-profile films established her as a box office draw, with comedic triumphs that showcased impeccable timing and a vulnerable edge that made those performances feel lived in rather than manufactured. She earned major industry recognition for a tour-de-force comic performance that combined slapstick, pathos, and a deft sense of rhythm. At the same time, a dramatic turn in a Western proved she could carry more serious material. Reviewers singled out that role as proof she was more than stereotype. She collaborated with top directors and leading actors, and she used powerful press imagery, both on set and through carefully arranged photo sessions, to cement an image that was at once glamorous and enigmatic. Photographers and filmmakers captured moments that would become cultural shorthand: the white dress lifted by an updraft, a sultry gaze on a movie poster, and those images soon outlived the original films, entering the collective visual memory. All of this integrated into a legacy that goes beyond box office tallies. Her efforts to control her own career anticipated later generations of performers who insist on producing and shaping their own work. The contrast between the manufactured Marilyn and the earnest actor who studied her craft makes her story a case study in celebrity agency and artistic reinvention. Look closely at her films, and you'll see a performer balancing show business savvy with genuine artistry, comic instincts honed to precision, dramatic vulnerability deliberately cultivated, and business moves designed to protect creative priorities. Watch the key films with an eye for the turning points, her comic mastery, the dramatic risks, the moments of production leadership, and you'll understand how fame and achievement can be wielded as tools, not just trophies. Explore those performances and consider how modern actors borrow from the blueprint she helped create. 5. Personal struggles and deeper insights. Born Norma Jeane Mortensen and raised in a patchwork of foster homes and an orphanage, she carried abandonment like a silent wound that shaped every choice. That early instability translated into an adulthood where the bright, sexualized public image sat over a fragile interior. The problem was clear. A global icon was trapped inside a persona that both protected and betrayed her. Pressures from studio contracts, relentless publicity, and a culture that prized appearance over depth pushed her toward quick fixes: prescription medications, performative blondness, and a string of troubled relationships that never filled the private void. She searched for solutions in two unexpected places: the discipline of acting and the intimacy of honest therapy. Studying method acting at the Actors Studio under Lee Strasberg became more than professional training. It was a form of self-repair. There she learned to turn vulnerability into technique, to use memory and emotional truth as tools rather than exposures. Therapy and analysis offered frames for her pain. She talked to professionals and worked to understand abandonment, attachment, and the compulsions that kept her repeating destructive patterns. Those efforts didn't erase her struggles, but they changed how she confronted them, and they deepened her performances in ways the tabloids never acknowledged. Concrete details make the pattern unmistakable. Prescription barbiturates and amphetamines, often issued to sustain grueling schedules or to sedate sleepless nights, became a dangerous crutch, contributing to erratic behavior on set and long periods of withdrawal from work. Colleagues and directors watched both brilliance and vulnerability. A woman who could read deeply, carrying a private library that included serious poets, yet who sometimes arrived exhausted or incapacitated. She married 3 times, seeking stability in relationships with a baseball legend and a prominent playwright, among others. But none of those unions healed the root anxieties. She suffered personal losses and fertility struggles that compounded her sense of being incomplete. At the same time, she deliberately cultivated intellectual and artistic pursuits, language study, poetry, and script work, that testified to a hunger for respect beyond the label of sex symbol. Those elements integrate into a haunting insight. The mask was both armor and impediment. Performance gave her agency. She could manipulate desire and attention to secure opportunity, but it also trapped her in a loop where authenticity became risky. Her investment in craft shows how trauma can be transformed into art. Her reliance on medications and the industry's tolerance of that reliance show how systems fail the people they profit from. For contemporary readers, the lesson is twofold. Recognize the cost of commodifying artists' humanity and appreciate that vulnerability, when guided and supported, can become a source of power rather than only pain. Look beyond the glitter and consider practical responses. Advocate for better mental health support for creatives, question the structures that reward appearance over well-being, and revisit her work with an eye for the tender intelligence behind the pose. If you're moved, share this perspective with someone who still sees only the mask. Support organizations that provide counseling to artists. Read her interviews and letters to hear the complex voice she fought to keep. 6. Legacy plus call to action. Subscribe, like, comment. Her public image, blonde bombshell, breathy laugh, and that white dress moment, often crowded out the craft and relentless ambition that fueled her work. Many remember the sparkle and not the study, the glamour and not the grit. That gap between myth and mastery created a persistent problem. Her true artistic contributions were at risk of being reduced to clichés rather than examined as serious, influential work. Short, sharp, and unfair. The answer has come from reclamation. Artists, scholars, and performers digging into her training, choices, and writings to reveal the intellect beneath the persona. She studied with a prominent acting teacher and fought for control of her career by creating her own production vehicle, moves that reframed her as an actor who pursued agency in a male-dominated industry. Her private notebooks and poems, collected and published after her life, offered intimate examples of introspection and literary ambition that many had never associated with the public image. Photographers and filmmakers who knew her personally have shared images and anecdotes that highlight a nuanced, deliberate artist rather than a one-note stereotype. Consider concrete examples that show the depth of her legacy. A contemporary actress won praise for portraying her vulnerability and professional ardor on screen, opening conversations about how actors interpret and humanize icons. Major pop artists reworked her visage into high art, turning ephemeral celebrity into enduring cultural commentary. And the publication of her personal writings gave fans and critics direct access to her inner voice. Fashion houses still quote her silhouettes and red lipstick in runway collections, and film schools dissect scenes she reshaped by insisting on script changes, rehearsal, or different direction, evidence of practical influence that extends into craft, commerce, and critique. This legacy matters because it reframes how we teach, make, and understand popular culture. The mask she wore became both shield and tool, and unpacking it helps us learn about performance, autonomy, and the cost of fame. If you want more deep dives into how individual artists rewrote the rules, subscribe to stay notified about future episodes that unpack myths and reveal method. If this perspective shifted the way you see her, like the video so we know to explore more stories like this. And comment below with your thoughts. Share your favorite lesser-known moment, a line from her writings that struck you, or a topic you want us to investigate next. We thought the mask was the story, the laugh, the breathy voice, the perfect hair. The problem was never the glamour itself, but how it hid a fiercely curious, disciplined woman who was boxed by an industry that preferred a convenient stereotype over a complicated mind. Her solution was relentless reinvention. Marilyn paid for her own training at the actor's studio. She founded her own production company to demand better roles, and she turned private notebooks of poems and questions into a quiet laboratory for her craft. Those moves rewrote the rules. She wasn't just performed. She learned, produced, pushed, and reshaped a star into an artist. Look closer, and the details shimmer. She studied method acting with Lee Strasberg, insisting on emotional truth in performance. She fought studios for control, choosing parts that challenged expectations. Behind the camera, she negotiated, invested, and proved a woman could steer her own career in an unforgiving system. Her journals reveal someone who read widely, wrote fearlessly, and felt the cost of fame in ways that still resonate. So what does that mean for us now? Marilyn's real genius was turning a forced mask into a tool, using the persona to access vulnerability, to connect, and to demand more. If you've ever felt pressured to perform a version of yourself, her story is permission to study harder, push back, and make your own choices. If this moved you, like, comment with the part that surprised you most, and subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive. Unseen letters and the private notebooks that illuminate Marilyn's creative process even further. Join us next time when we open those pages and listen to the voice behind the mask.